Across the counter, the waitress froze mid-step. Her smile faltered, cracking at the edges, the way glass fractures under too much pressure. The man sitting at the counter leaned toward her again, invading that fragile barrier of personal space with a casualness that wasn't casual at all. It was deliberate, almost predatory. For a moment, her eyes broke from him and found mine across the diner. It wasn't a long look, not even a second, but it was enough. A silent plea lived in that glance, desperate, uncertain, searching for an anchor. She wanted someone to see, and, against all odds, I had seen. Around us, though, the world went on as if nothing were wrong. Other customers bent their heads over their plates. Forks scraped against china. Coffee steamed in chipped mugs. No one else looked. Everyone else looked away. The morning sun streamed generously through the wide diner windows, gilding the black and white checkered tiles into a patchwork of gold. The booths with their squeaky red vinyl backs soaked up the light, turning ordinary breakfast into something warm and almost nostalgic. I leaned back against the vinyl of my own booth, letting the sunshine soak into my shoulders, though the heat did little to ease the knot forming in my chest. My coffee sat steaming in its heavy, white mug. Its sharp, bitter aroma wrapped around me like a ritual, grounding me. I needed it on mornings like this, mornings when the weight of responsibility, of bills, of absence pressed too hard on me. Coffee was small but steady, a reminder that rituals had power. Even when life broke and shifted in ways you couldn't control, a hot cup of coffee stayed the same. Across from me, Sophie was in her own world, a bright, syrup-sticky world that had nothing to do with tension or strangers or waitresses. At 7 years old, she approached her pancakes as if they were a puzzle she had been assigned to solve. With furrowed brows and her tongue poking from the corner of her mouth, she drizzled syrup over the short stack until the plate resembled a golden pond. Then she gripped her knife like a surgeon about to make the most delicate cut. The knife scraped loudly against the plate, clinking and skidding in her small hands. She muttered under her breath, "Daddy, it keeps slipping." I swallowed back a laugh and leaned forward, my voice gentle. "Try holding the fork steady with your other hand." Her determination was bigger than her hands. She pressed down again, more careful this time. The pancake yielded, cutting into an uneven triangle. Her eyes lit up, wide and triumphant, as though she'd conquered Everest. "See," I told her with a wink. "Told you could do it." Sophie giggled and stuffed the piece into her mouth, syrup trailing down her chin. I passed her a napkin without a word. She wiped her face in the careless way kids do, grinning at me with sticky cheeks. I smiled back to spite myself. These were the mornings that made the heaviness tolerable, the simple, ordinary ones where my daughter's laughter filled the air, drowning out everything else. She didn't know it, but she was my anchor. When deadlines loomed or bills stacked too high or the loneliness crept in too sharp since her mother left, it was mornings like this that steadied me. A booth. Pancakes. Sophie's laughter. These were the level grounds where I could breathe. Between bites, Sophie launched into her weekend plans, her voice bubbling with excitement. "We can go to the park, Daddy. And maybe fly the kite if the wind's good. And, oh, we could bake cookies. But you have to promise not to burn them this time." I raised my hands in mock surrender. "One time, Sophie. I burned them one time. They were black, Daddy. Black. Even the dog wouldn't eat them." She dissolved into giggles so big she nearly choked on her pancake. I reached over and ruffled her hair, grinning at her messy joy. She was everything good in my world, proof that joy could still survive even the hardest seasons. But while Sophie spoke of kites and cookies and chocolate chips, my attention snagged elsewhere. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of our waitress. She was weaving between tables with practiced ease, her tray balanced perfectly in her hands, her smile fixed in place. Her name tag read Emily in faded black letters, edges worn soft from years of shifts. She looked like any other waitress in any other small-town diner, quick, capable, efficient. But something in her eyes, something sharp and fragile, didn't fit. It wasn't part of the easy rhythm of a Saturday breakfast crowd. It tugged at me, refusing to let go. I told myself I was imagining it. Just a long shift, maybe a bad morning. But then I saw him. At the counter, hunched over his coffee, sat a man who leaned forward every time Emily passed. His mug was likely cold by now, but he lingered. He muttered low, too soft for me to hear, but not too soft for her to feel. I didn't need to hear his words. Emily's reaction told me everything. The way her knuckles whitened around the coffee pot, how she masked it with a quick smile that didn't reach her eyes. The way her shoulders crept tighter each time she passed him, like she was unconsciously trying to make herself smaller. Sophie's fork scraped against her plate again, snapping me back to the booth. "To the park after breakfast?" she asked eagerly. "Yeah," I answered, forcing a smile. "We can do that." But my gaze drifted again. Emily walked past, the man leaning closer, murmuring something that made her laugh. But it wasn't laughter. Not real laughter. It was sharp, brittle, a laugh pressed through clenched teeth. Her eyes darted not to him, but to the kitchen door, measuring distance, gauging escape. The knot in my chest tightened. I'd seen this before. The difference between friendly banter and pressure was clear, and this was pressure. Sophie's chatter tried to pull me back, her syrup-coated fork waving in the air as she described the kite's tail. But my mind was split, anchored to her with one hand and drifting toward Emily with the other. The knot in my chest tightened. I'd seen this before. The difference between friendly banter and pressure was clear, and this was pressure. Sophie's chatter tried to pull me back, her syrup-coated fork waving in the air as she described the kite's tail. But my mind was split, anchored to her with one hand and drifting toward Emily with the other. Each time Emily passed, the signs grew clearer. Small things at first, the subtle step backward when he leaned too close, the flicker of her eyes toward the kitchen, the tiny flinch when his hand brushed hers. Little details others missed, but I didn't. I couldn't. And then Sophie noticed. Her fork froze midair. Her brow furrowed. She didn't have the words, not yet, but children are sharper than we think. They feel what adults try to hide. She tugged at my sleeve, her voice low, heavy for someone so small. "Daddy." That one word landed in my chest like a stone. I wanted to believe Emily was just tired, that it was nothing. But Sophie had seen it too, and if a child could recognize the wrongness, then it was real. The choice sat heavy on me. Stay quiet, keep our breakfast safe and undisturbed. Or stand, risk a scene, and step into something messy. My hand gripped the coffee mug tighter. My pulse thudded faster. I glanced at Sophie again. She was watching me, waiting. What kind of father would I be if I told her to be brave, to do the right thing, and then looked away? I knew the truth. If I stayed silent, I'd teach her silence too. I slid my plate aside, pushed up from the booth, and stood. Sophie's eyes widened with hope and fear. Emily's gaze flicked to me as I crossed the diner. Relief bloomed there, fragile but unmistakable. I gave her a small nod, the kind that said, "You're not alone anymore." The diner's hum dulled as I walked toward the counter. My footsteps sounded louder than they should have, like each one was calling attention to what I was about to do. Forks clinked faintly in the background. Someone laughed from a back booth. The jukebox sputtered out a scratchy tune. But for me, the world had narrowed to Emily and the man leaning across from her. Emily's eyes found mine again. For a split second, she froze, startled, uncertain. Then something flickered across her face. Relief. As though she had been waiting all along for someone, anyone, to step out of the blur of indifference. I smiled at her, deliberately warm, casual, like greeting an old friend. "Hey, Emily." Her lips parted, confusion mixing with gratitude. I had read her name off her tag, but I said it like we were already connected. The man at the counter turned sharply. His eyes narrowed. His hand tightened around his mug, scraping ceramic against the counter. His voice came out hard. "You know her?" I kept my voice steady, calm, not giving him the rise he wanted. "She's working. Why don't you give her some space?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The firmness carried. A hush rippled through the diner, conversation stalling. People didn't turn their heads, but they were listening. The man sneered. I was just talking. She doesn't look like she wants to talk. Silence stretched taut between us. Emily stopped moving entirely, caught in the fragile balance. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips, but I kept my posture loose, controlled. Strength wasn't always fists. Sometimes it was refusing to budge when someone tried to crowd another human being into silence. The man's jaw twitched. He muttered something under his breath, slapped a few crumpled bills on the counter, and pushed himself off the stool. The bell over the diner door jangled sharp as he shoved it open, then slammed shut behind him. And just like that, the air shifted. Emily let out a shaky breath that sounded like it had been locked in her lungs for hours. Her shoulders sagged. One hand gripped the counter for balance, her knuckles pale. For the first time all morning, her smile dropped completely. No performance. Just raw exhaustion, fragile relief, and a trace of disbelief. Thank you, she whispered. Her voice trembled, but not from fear anymore. From release. No one's ever stepped in before. I thought I just had to deal with it. I shook my head, steady but gentle. No one should have to deal with that. Not ever. Her eyes glistened. She nodded faintly, her mask cracking wider. Across the diner, Sophie sat in our booth, wide-eyed, her little face glowing with something that made my chest ache. Pride. The diner began to breathe again. Forks moved. Voices rose in low murmurs. The jukebox filled the air with a new song. But for Emily, time hadn't reset. She stood still, one hand braced against the counter, as though giving herself permission to exist again. I didn't crowd her. I just stayed present, letting silence hold steady. She glanced at me, lips parting as though searching for words. None came. That was all right. Sometimes silence carried more weight than words ever could. From the booth, Sophie slid down and padded across the checkered floor. She tugged gently at Emily's apron. When Emily crouched, Sophie tore her last pancake in half, syrup dripping from the uneven edge. She set the sticky piece carefully on a napkin and pushed it toward her. You can have some, Sophie said, her voice small but serious. For a moment, Emily blinked, caught off guard. Then she laughed softly, really laughed this time. It was warm and unforced, carrying no brittle edge. She crouched lower, accepted the offering like it was something more precious than food. Thank you, sweetheart. The warmth in her voice filled the space between them. I stood a step away, my chest tight with quiet pride. I had stepped in when it mattered, but it was Sophie's innocent kindness that closed the circle. Where my presence had made the air safe again, Sophie's gesture filled it with something softer, comfort. Emily straightened slowly, still holding the scrap of pancake, like she wasn't ready to let it go. For the first time that morning, her smile reached her eyes fully. And I understood in that moment that kindness wasn't always loud. It wasn't always grand gestures. Sometimes it was as small as making someone feel safe enough to laugh again. Weeks passed before Sophie and I returned to that diner. The same Saturday morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows, painting the tiles gold. The smell of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee hung in the air. Sliding into the familiar red vinyl booth felt almost like stepping back into a memory. Only this time, I noticed the difference immediately. There was no tension tugging at my chest, no unease prickling the back of my neck. Sophie pressed her hands to the glass, fogging it with her breath, giggling as she drew a lopsided heart with her fingertip. I shook my head with a soft smile, grateful for these small rituals. They stitched our days together more securely than anything else ever could. Then Emily appeared. She spotted us quickly, balancing a tray with ease. When her eyes landed on us, her smile came instantly, and it was different. Not the forced, polite cheer of a waitress powering through a shift. This one was real, effortless, warm. Good to see you again, she said, setting menus on the table. Her voice carried none of the strain I remembered. Instead, it was light, open, grounded. She poured my coffee and set down Sophie's chocolate milk, sliding it across the table with a practiced flick of her wrist. I nodded back, returning her smile. Sophie lifted her glass right away, leaving a chocolate mustache on her upper lip. Emily chuckled softly, the sound natural, easy. Then she leaned in slightly, her voice dropping just enough to carry a quiet weight. "I wanted to tell you," she began, her tone steady but low. "What you did that day, it meant more than you know." I stayed silent, letting her continue. "I told my manager about some of the things that have happened. They're making changes. Real changes. I don't think I would have spoken up if you hadn't reminded me I matter." Her voice wavered, but only for a heartbeat. Then she straightened, offering a small smile that carried both gratitude and a new kind of strength. Something swelled in my chest. Not pride, not exactly.
It wasn't about me.
What I felt was quieter, relief that someone's life, even in a small way, was better because I hadn't stayed silent. And beyond that, pride in Sophie, because she had witnessed everything. She had seen that kindness wasn't just words, it was action. That courage didn't have to be loud. When breakfast was done, Sophie slipped her small hand into mine as we walked to the door. Outside, the day was bright, the air crisp. She looked up at me, her expression thoughtful. "Daddy," she said softly, "I think you made her braver." Her words caught me off guard with their simple clarity. My throat tightened. I gave her hand a squeeze and smiled down at her. "Maybe," I said. "But you helped too." And together, we stepped into the morning light, leaving behind a world just a little bit kinder than it had been before. Then I turned to the counter.